Rebecca of Pocketful of Poseys. Today's project is an Edwardian corset cover, an evening corset cover, and without further ado, let's get into it. Here we go. I used a truly Victorian pattern, TVE02, and started laying out my pattern pieces on white cotton voile. I cut out the pieces and got ready to start assembly. I began by marking the gathering points on the front pieces. Next, I pinned the facings to the center fronts. I then sewed the facings. I turned an inch and then another inch on those facings, covering the raw edges and top stitched. I pinned the back to the fronts at the side seams. And I sewed the side seams. I trimmed the seam allowances and realized that I had forgotten to do French seams. Oops! So I zigzagged the raw edges. To bind the top, I used pale yellow bias tape. I thought it would be cheery. I added lace to the fronts. I sewed it down. Then I trimmed the seam allowance and turned the bias tape to the inside, covering the raw edges. I secured it with a whip stitch. My next step was running gathering stitches on the bottom fronts. Then I pinned the waistband on. I pulled on the gathering threads to fit the front pieces into the waistband. I took it to the machine and sewed the waistband on. Next, I turned the waistband to the inside and sewed it down with whip stitches. Button time! I used some shelled buttons I had in my stash. My buttonhole foot has disappeared. I have no idea where it is, so I sewed the buttonholes by hand. Thor and Loki made sure I was sewing neatly. I don't know, maybe it's just seems too big in here. So I'm wondering, so the straps are if the straps go there. I mean, I guess it is supposed to be kind of blousy, but I'm wondering if I don't know the best way to do that. Man, would that look super weird? If I just did a little pleat. Ultimately, I did choose to do 2 little pleats on each side. I checked placement for the ribbon straps and sewed them on. Lucius helped. And it's done. I'm happy with how it turned out, and I may make one in black sometime. Hello, I'm Rebecca of Pocketful of Poseys. Today's project is an Edwardian chemise. I needed a new chemise to go with my late Victorian ball gown bodice because the one that I already had was too high in the front and showed under the bodice. So I used a truly Victorian pattern, and I will link that down below, and this is how it went. Here we go. After I cut my pattern pieces out, I pinned those pattern pieces to my white cotton voile. The back and the front are the same pattern piece, except the front is cut lower than the back. I pinned my pieces together at the side seams, and I used French seams, so I pinned the wrong sides together first. When I went to sew the side seams, Lucius decided it was prime petting time. I obliged. He was quite insistent. I finally turned off my machine and just gave pets and waited. With no regard to the danger, Lucius kept trying to nuzzle the sewing machine. Finally, he let me sew. Hercules got in on the action while I was trimming the seam allowances. It was an unusually dangerous day. I turned my pieces right sides together and pinned the side seams, encasing the raw edges. Back to the machine to finish those French seams. Now the raw edges will be encased on the inside. Hercules was back to assist while I sewed the shoulder seams, also with French seams. I next ran gathering stitches on the front and back necklines. I pulled on the gathering threads. Then I checked the width against my chest. I added some cotton lace trim to the front neckline. I used the machine and then finished it by hand. This was probably not the best plan. I think I should have just done a bias strip like I did on the back. Then I cut the seam allowance on the back and added a bias strip to the back neckline and finished it by hand. To finish the neckline on the shoulders, I used white twill tape. I sewed it right sides together and then turned it to the inside, pinning it in place. I did a small rolled hem on the arm size by hand, and I turned the bottom edge up 1/2 inch twice to hem the chemise. This was all done on the couch watching TV, so no footage of that. Then it was complete. Overall, I'm happy with it. I think it's a little too big in the arm sides and shoulders, so I need to take it up a little bit to make it fit better. But other than that, it's going to serve the purpose I need it to serve. So I'm very happy with it. Hello, I'm Rebecca of Pocketful of Poseys. Today's project is the first in my series of my new Edwardian outfit. I used a pattern from this from Black Snail Patterns. I'm very pleased to tell you that this video is sponsored by Black Snail Patterns, and if you would like to receive a 15% discount on any digital pattern, you can follow the link down below or use the code Pocketful of Poseys. I've had this pattern for a while and I'm so glad that I finally decided to get started with this Edwardian project. So without further ado, let's get to it. Here we go. I used Black Snail pattern number 1015, the Edwardian straight front corset. Straight front corsets, or S-bend corsets, were made as a, quote, healthier corset. They create that iconic round hip, low bust, pigeon breast look of the Edwardian era. I will be adding a hip pad and bust enhancer to achieve this look with my Edwardian day dress project. I began with a mock-up. I used canvas that I had in my stash. After transferring the pattern markings, I pinned the pieces together. Hercules was there to offer support and get pets. To try the mock-up on, I used my awl to make holes for lacing. Okay, mock-up number one, I think probably only one, is done. Now, I did not use the synthetic whalebone because I don't have that much, and I didn't want to cut and not have enough for the actual corset. So I used that sew-in boning stuff, which I'm not sure why I have it or when I bought it, but it was there, so I used it. Now, I think the mock-up fit is pretty good. Just kind of do a little turn here to see it all the way around. But, so I think, honestly, I'm just going to go with this. I think I might add just a little bit to center front because I just cut this on a fold, and so I'm gonna need a little bit more to fold over for the Hercules has my ties. I'm gonna need more to fold over for the bust in the front. I just put a piece of boning down the middle. And this is not boned as much as the real one will be, or as sturdy, boned as sturdily. Is that a word? Sturdily? I'm not sure. Anyway, but this is just canvas, and even with the less sturdy boning and I didn't do 2 bones at each boning point. I just did one because I was lazy, but I just wanted to really get an idea to see if I needed to make any fit adjustments as far as whether it would be big enough for me because I am bigger, my measurements are bigger than the pattern. But I think I'm not going to make any adjustments. I think the fit is actually pretty good. Yay! Thor. Get a little bit closer here. Now with more sturdy boning, it is, I don't know, because the Edwardian corset doesn't come up as high, so I think it's sitting where it needs to sit. Bust wise. So yeah. Off we go. For the actual corset, I used pink cotton twill. Coutil was not in my budget for this project. I transferred the pattern markings and started assembly. To the machine to sew the front and side front together. The seams are felled. I trimmed one side and folded the longer side over to cover the raw edges. I basted the felled seam before top stitching both edges of the seam. It's much like blue jeans are done. I repeated that process of felling and top stitching on all of the other seams. My next step was to pin a waist tape in, and I used twill tape. Then I pinned and sewed the back facing. I ironed the seam and ironed under the seam allowance. The facing was turned over to cover the seam and the waist tape. It will be top stitched right next to the seam line. Now to boning channels. Rather than use pink twill because I didn't have enough left, I used twill tape. One length is wide enough for 2 boning channels. To sew the boning channels, I first sewed down the center of the twill tape. Then I sewed very close to each edge. Alright, so corset progress. I have sewn my boning channels in on one side, so I'm about to sew the second side in, the right side. And then put in the busk and whatever the other half of the busk is called. I can't think of it now, but that's next after I sew in the right side boning channels. Before I inserted the busk, I sewed on a facing to each side of center front. On the right side, I left openings for the hooks of the busk to slide through. Then my brain wasn't working and I forgot to switch to a zipper foot. Broken needle. I replaced the needle, put on the zipper foot, and continued on. For the next side of the busk, I marked and used the awl to make holes to insert the loops. Success! My next step was binding the bottom edge of the corset with white bias tape. I sewed it on with the machine. Time to insert the synthetic whalebone. I cut each piece to length and trimmed the edges. After all the boning was in, Hercules and I pinned bias tape to the top edge of the corset. Then Lucius helped me sew the top binding on. For flossing the boning channels, I didn't have any purple embroidery floss, so I used thread. I made a mess of it. Hercules says best not to dwell on that. To decorate the corset, I added white lace. I sewed it on while watching Supernatural on the couch, so no video, and then added the grommets to the back. We are done. Put the grommets in. I hand sewed the lace on the front. All that's left is to lace and add a purple silk ribbon for general prettiness. And it's done. I did my hair and makeup and laced myself into my new corset. I could have used more grommets to get a more exaggerated look and tighter lacing, but it's very comfortable. And adding a hip pad and bust enhancer will help me get the Edwardian silhouette and still be comfortable. I'm very happy with how this turned out. It is a great pattern and I definitely recommend it. I can't wait to finish the rest of my Edwardian ensemble. I'm Rebecca of Pocketful of Poseys. Today's project is my Edwardian combinations. I used a truly Victorian pattern for this, and I'm so excited to share this with you. Now, while I was in the process of making these combinations, I also took a little trip to visit my sister. So I did a little car sewing, and then I got to try out her vintage Singer sewing machine, and that was really exciting. She hadn't used it yet because she wasn't exactly sure how to oil it and thread it and all of that stuff. So we figured that all out together. I'm really excited to share these combinations with you. So without further ado, let's get to it. Here we go. I got my pattern cut out and I'm using Truly Victorian TV E02, the Edwardian underwear. I first picked lace for the ruffle on top of the combinations. I sewed it on at work one day when I had some students on vacation. Then I went on vacation, and while I was in the car, I sewed the center front facings, which will be the button plackets, as well as the front facings and the back facing. My sister has a vintage Singer sewing machine with a knee press instead of a foot pedal. We got it oiled and threaded and gave it a try on some scrap fabric. To oil the machine.
A drop of oil being applied at each of the following faces. The size of the needle bar, number 9. Let's see.
Sew a little bit and then push that and see what happens.
Ah, there we go. Look at that.
It's cool. I should use this instead of my regular sewing machine.
Okay. I feel so awkward. Whoops. Okay. Changed the needle and gave it another go. Oh yeah, that's much smoother. Much smoother. I felt confident in the machine, so I sewed the shoulder seams on the top of my combinations. Next, I sewed the side seams. I really enjoyed using this vintage Singer, and I really want one for myself, and I wish I had room for one. My next step was top stitching the button plackets at center front. Since I used French seams on the side seams, I trimmed the seam allowance and folded right side to enclose the raw edges on the inside. I kept going forward with construction by top stitching the front facings and the back facing. So, of course, I am on a visit to my sister's, but I brought sewing with me. And I've been working on my combinations with using her vintage Singer. And I've got my drawers cut out. So, I'm going to get going on that. Probably not today, probably tomorrow. I'm probably going to pin them, just pin them together today. I should probably read the instructions first, but I'm going to do that. That is my next step in the combinations. But first, I needed to bind the armholes of the top of the combinations. I considered bias tape, but chose lace because I liked the look better. Now to the drawers. I sewed the leg seams. Next, I attached the facing to the open crotch seams. I folded the facings to the inside and sewed it down, enclosing the raw edges. Confession time, I forgot to bring my facing pattern piece, so I drew one and I think it's wider than the facing should have been. Ruffle time! I gathered, pinned, and sewed the ruffle to the legs of the drawers. I used cotton eyelet for the ruffle. Next, I pinned the waistband to the drawers. The top will also be pinned to the waistband to create the combinations. And then my vacation was over and it was time to go home. So, I am back from vacation, and I think the last thing I did while I was up there was I put the waistband on the drawers, and I just did that by hand because I was hanging out with my family and watching movies and stuff. And then I realized that I had completely messed up the legs of this. I attached front to front and back to back instead of front to back and on both sides for the open crotch seam. So I unpicked that, and as I was unpicking that, Lucius is making noise. Get down. And as I was unpicking that, I noticed that I had on the ruffles on the bottom, I noticed that I had put them on, well, I had caught some of the drawers material kind of underneath, so it was bunched up in some places. So on the car ride home, I just unpicked it. I had some little sharp thread snips, so I was just very careful and just unpicked both of the ruffles from both of the legs. So now I'm home and I will reattach the seams, the crotch seams, or I'm calling them that, but the crotch is open. But anyway, where the front and back legs meet in the middle, I will reattach those, and then I will repin the ruffle and sew that on, and then go from there. After that, I will attach the top to the drawers with the waistband, and then there's a second waistband that goes on the inside covering the raw edges. So I repinned the ruffles to both legs and sewed them on. As I was trimming the seam allowance with pinking shears, I repaired the little hole I cut. It's on the inner leg, so not terribly worried about it. Then I pinned the top to the waistband. To fit the front onto the waistband, I pleated the excess. You could gather it also. I believe the instructions said to gather it. My next step was pinning the inside waistband over the raw edges of the outer waistband and sewing it with a whip stitch. Hercules helped. Finally, I added a couple of hooks and bars to close the waistband. Then it was finished. I took some photos in the 90% humidity, and there are definitely things I will change. Maybe. The waistband is a tad too small. I realized as I put it on that I mistakenly used my corseted waist measurement. I also think the waistband is too wide, so I may go back and fix that, but it does go under the corset, so I may not. Also, the shoulder seams need to be taken up. That's the thing I think I will fix. Mosquitoes. Hello, I'm Rebecca of Pocketful of Poseys. Today's video is all about Edwardian enhancement garments. You may have wondered, as I did, how Edwardian ladies achieved that classic pigeon breast silhouette. Well, they, like we do today with our push-up bras and our padded butt things, I don't know, I think people wear those, don't they? Sometimes. Anyway, they used different garments to help achieve that silhouette. So if you pad your hips, your waist is going to naturally look smaller. And if you pad your bust, your waist is going to look smaller. Not only did they touch up photos to, fake it in photos, they also wore different things to help achieve that silhouette. Today I'm going to be making a bust improver. I will link the pattern down below, as well as a hip pad. I will also link that pattern down below. So without further ado, let's get into it. Here we go. As always, I began assembly by cutting out my patterns. For the bust improver, I used a pattern from Wearing History, and for the hip pad, I used a free pattern from Black Snail Patterns. I cut out my bust improver pattern. I used cotton broadcloth. I began assembly by pinning the base layers together. After sewing, I trimmed the seam allowance and turned it right side out using the opening I left. I did not follow the pattern for this step. The pattern called for binding the edges with twill tape, but I chose not to. Next, I marked the points to attach the bust pads. I sewed gathering stitches around the bust pad pieces and pinned it in place, adjusting the gathers to fit. I sewed it down with the machine, leaving an opening to add polyfill. Next, I pinned the opening closed and sewed it down on the machine. My next step was pinning gathered lace around the bust pad. After I sewed it down, I repeated all of the bust pad steps on the opposite side. Then I pinned and sewed gathered lace along the top edge of the bust improver. I also watched Anne of Green Gables to get in an Edwardian mood. Onto the hip pad. After cutting out my top and bottom pieces out of cotton broadcloth, I pinned the darts on both pieces. I sewed the darts on the machine out of focus. The pattern called for batting, but although I truly thought I had some, it could not be located, so I cut out 4 layers of cotton flannel to use instead of batting, and 4 additional layers for the top shaping pieces. I stacked my bottom flannel layers and pinned along the dart marks. The pattern instructed to cut the darts and sew the edges together by hand or using a zigzag stitch. I basted along the dart lines first since I had multiple layers. Then I zigzagged the edges of the darts together. My next step was layering the top flannel pieces. I pinned them in place. Then I sewed them along the bottom edge with a whip stitch. Next, I sandwiched the flannel layers between the top and bottom broadcloth layers. Lucius then decided it was time for cuddles. I trimmed the seam allowances and pinned bias tape around the hip pad. I sewed it with the machine, then turned it to the back side and whip stitched it down by hand. My next step was sewing some quilting to help shape the bottom of the hip pad. Okay, I am almost finished with the hip pad. I have finished the quilting along the bottom edge. I did 4 rows and then I added some grommets. They are not perfectly even, but I don't care. So all that's left to do on this is to add some twill tape for ties and it's done. I added the twill tape ties and both Edwardian enhancers were finished. I had a lot of fun making these little accessories. They really do enhance my shape and help my Edwardian silhouette. Of course, Thor and Hercules had to assist my getting dressed video. Chemise, stockings, and my American Duchess Bernadette shoes first. Corset next. I actually used long enough ties that I can put it on by myself. Now, the bust improver. It can be pinned to the chemise to keep it in place. Next are my new combinations. I know it can be worn under the corset, but I thought since it's drawers and a corset cover combined, I should try it over the corset. I still need to take up the shoulders a bit. So swishy. Hip pad next. It doesn't fit under the corset, so I put it over the combinations. Then a petticoat. Thor is helping, of course. I'm using a modern blouse from Torrid, mostly because my shirt waist was dirty. I paired it with my blue walking skirt. Finally, a pink belt. I am very happy with these projects. They were pretty quick and easy to sew, and I think they really do improve my silhouette. Hello, I'm Rebecca of Pocketful of Poseys. Today's video is my Edwardian day dress. I am so excited to share this with you. And I used a pattern from Black Snail Patterns for this. And this video is kindly sponsored by Black Snail Patterns. And if you would like a 15% discount on any digital pattern, you can use the link below or type in Pocketful of Poseys for a promo code. This dress has been a while in the making. I've been planning it for a while and I finally get to share it with you. I decided to alter this day dress pattern a little bit as far as the materials I used, because I really wanted one of those frothy, sheerish, Edwardian white day dresses. So that's what I did. So without further ado, here we go. I'm using Black Snail Patterns number 0916, the Edwardian day dress pattern, and I will be making a few changes to the pattern as I go. I began by making a mock-up of the bodice. Okay, so, oh, Thor just came in. Come on, buddy. Mock-up is done, and I'm going to put my corset on and try it on me. Tried it on Freya. Looks pretty good. I'm going to make a few changes, and I'm going to try the mock-up of the collar, because black snail, as much as I love black snail patterns, a lot of times collars are small, even if you're not a big person. So I'm going to try that out and see what I need to do. I know I need to make the neckline bigger, wider, so I'm going to cut some of that off of the mock-up before I try it on. Alright, here we go. I tried it on over my Edwardian corset, link below to that video, and realized I needed a bit more room and that the back was a little short. After making note of those changes I needed, I started assembling the skirt pattern. Each skirt gore piece is lengthened 10 inches. The skirt ruffle pieces are likewise lengthened by 10 inches. Onto the bodice lining, I used cotton voile. After cutting the bodice lining pieces out, I pinned the darts. Also, don't worry mama, I did iron these pieces eventually. To the machine to sew the darts and the center front seam. I cut the darts open, zigzagged the raw edges, and whip stitched them down. Then I added strips of twill tape to act as boning channels on each dart. I sewed the boning channels down by hand. I went ahead and put the boning channels in the lining, even though the pattern says to do it later after the lining and the outer fabric are connected, but since I'm using such thin fabrics, I figured it should probably go ahead and do that now rather than risk accidentally going through to the outer fabric when I'm hand sewing those boning channels in. So did it to the front piece. Now I'm going to connect the back pieces on the side piece to the front piece and then of the lining, and then I'll do the boning channels in the side seams as well. So off we go. Next I pinned and sewed the back lining pieces to the side lining pieces. I also watched Jeeves and Wooster. Hercules was helpful as always. I moved back to the skirt and began pinning the gores together. I had some moments of confusion when it seemed like my marks weren't lining up, but then I realized I marked one of them incorrectly. I fixed that, and all was well. When I got all of the gores pinned together, I put it on Freya to check the fit. I had a little excess at center back, but I didn't cut any off because I wanted to test the fit on me with the corset and hip pad. Time to sew the skirt gores together, and I used a 1/4 inch seam allowance instead of a 5/8 inch seam allowance as the pattern indicated, because I knew I needed more room in the hip area. My next step was making the skirt placket. I sewed the bottom edge right sides together, trimmed and turned it right side out. The placket will close with hooks and eyes. I sewed the eyes on the placket before sewing the placket to the skirt. The placket is pinned to the skirt and then sewn so that the eyes barely protrude the seam allowance. Hercules assisted while I reread the placket instructions. I don't know why, I was just confused. The instructions made sense. I just couldn't make sense of them in my head for a while. To sew the placket, I took it slow and used the hand wheel of the machine to make sure the needle didn't hit the metal eyes. Then I sewed the right side facing. That's when I realized it was too narrow to do a double fold, so I just zigzagged the raw edge. I sewed hooks to the right side of the skirt opening. Both kitties felt the urge to lend their support as I top stitched next to the seam line of the placket and right side facing. The instructions said to do a prick stitch, but I was lazy. Then I pinned and sewed the back seam closed up to the placket. Then Lucius needed even more love, and I admit I appreciated the cuddles. Hercules had to get in some cuddles too. Onto the skirt ruffle. I pinned and sewed the ruffle pieces together. Then I went ahead and hemmed the ruffle before gathering it. Also, I elected not to line the skirt because I wanted to maintain a certain amount of sheerness. I admit it freely that I sewed the hem on the machine. My next step was pinning the ruffle to the bottom of the skirt and gathering it to fit. Then Thor needed pets. To the machine to sew the ruffle to the skirt. Alright, my skirt is basically finished. I still have to put the waistband on, but I'm going to wait to do that because I need to put my corset on and all of that to check the fit for the waistband, because Freya has a different style corset on than my Edwardian corset, so I just want to make sure that it's going to fit correctly. And I also want to put the hip pad on and all of that before I finalize that waistband on the skirt. So the bodice lining is done. I still need to add the boning channels on the side seams, but other than that, it's done. The lining is done. I'm about to start putting together the outer fabric, and I'm using a different fabric than the skirt, mostly because I had it and I thought it was pretty, and it went with the skirt well, because the skirt has these little raised dots on it, and so does the bodice fabric, but the bodice fabric also, well, I'm just going to show you. Hang on. The bodice fabric also has these little, it almost looks like insertion, but it's not. It's just little lines, and I thought that would be very, very pretty for the bodice. So they match, they go together, but they're not exactly the same. That also means, because the way this is made, it's not, the skirt and the bodice are not actually sewn together. They're just attached with hooks and eyes, like you attach the skirt to the bodice with hooks and eyes. So I figure I can mix and match. I can use this bodice with different skirts if I want to. So I'm pretty excited about that. So, however, I'm getting going with the outer fabric for the bodice, and I cannot find the pattern piece for the sleeve lining. So I think I might have to print those pieces out again, because I've searched, and I mean, let's be honest, my room is a disaster at this moment. There is stuff everywhere, and there's just, it's bad. So that's probably why I can't find it. I probably stuck it somewhere thinking, oh, I'm gonna need this, and now I can't find it. So I may just print those pages out again, and for the sleeve lining, and then I'll get going with that. I'm going to use that same voile, the plain voile that I used for the bodice lining, for the sleeve lining, and yeah, I also can't find the the skirt waistband pattern piece. They must be together somewhere with Lucius or Hercules or something. I don't know where they are, so I might print that out again too. Although I think I can just cut out a waistband for the skirt. Hey, Mal. Are you telling me you don't have it? You don't have it? You don't know where it is either? So, here we go. I sewed the bodice outer fabric side seams and shoulder seams. Next, I pinned the collar to the neck edge of the bodice. After sewing, I trimmed and clipped the curved seam allowance of the collar. I made the placket for the bodice next, and the process is exactly the same as the skirt placket, except you sew the top closed right sides together instead of the bottom. I actually followed the directions and used a prick stitch on the bodice openings next to the seam allowance. Now to attach the bodice to the bodice lining. I pinned them together at the neckline first. Next, I pleated the bottom front of the bodice to fit the lining and pinned it to the lining. Progress is being made on my dress. I have pinned the outer fabric onto the lining. of the bodice. And there's a collar, a jabot collar, I believe is what it's called, that I have to figure out or even decide whether I'm going to use that collar. I don't know. Maybe it's already cut out, so at least the outer, you know, the base layer of the collar is cut out. It's supposed to have lace on it, and I have some lace that I think would look pretty. However, it has a really pretty edge, and with the shape of the jabot, I wouldn't be able to use that pretty edge unless I cut it or did some finagling of it. And I'm not sure how that would go. Anyway, I'm still thinking about that part of it. But I need to put the waistband on the skirt. I need to baste the lining and the outer fabric together along the bottom edge and around the arm side. And then after that, put the lining and the collar, and then attach the waistband. And then it's pretty much done except for the jabot, which I'm still deciding on. So, yay! I basted the bodice to the lining along the waist and arm size. Then I press the seam allowance under on the bottom edge of the collar lining. My next step was pinning and sewing the collar lining to the collar right sides together. I trimmed the seam allowance and flipped the lining to the inside. The folded edge will cover the raw edges of the collar. I sewed the lining down with a whip stitch. Then I spent some time on the jabot collar. I decided to make it separate from the bodice so that I can wear it or not as my fancy takes me. I pinned and sewed lace to the base fabric. Back to the bodice and time to tackle the waistband. I added some sew-in interfacing to the lining. Next, I pinned the waistband fabric to the lining at the bottom edge, right sides together. After sewing, I flipped the waistband right side out and top stitched along the bottom edge. My next step was pinning and sewing the bodice waist to the waistband outer fabric. I turned the waistband lining edge under and whip stitched it to the bodice, covering the raw edges on the inside of the bodice. I realized I had some eyelet left over from my combination, so I sewed the pieces together and gathered them to attach to the jabot collar. I pinned the waistband to the skirt next and sewed it on. I turned it over and folded it to cover the raw edges on the inside of the skirt. Back to the fancy collar. I arranged the eyelet around the bottom edge of the collar. I checked out the effect on Freya and experimented with more lace trim. More lace is always better than less lace, right? I sewed the smaller lace trim on with a loose running stitch. I wanted to make sure it didn't fold over onto itself. Then I realized that I had forgotten to add the boning to the boning channels, so I did that. To finish the bodice waistband, I added a skirt hook and bar. And now, the sleeves. I did have some sleevels, but it was my own fault, not the pattern or the instructions. I first assembled the sleeve lining. Next, I ran some gathering stitches on the top of the outer sleeves. I pinned and sewed the outer sleeve seam on both sleeves. After sewing the cuffs to the lining right sides together, I began putting the lining and outer sleeve together, matching marks and making sure things were lining up correctly. Another change I made was to gather the bottom of the outer sleeve instead of pleat. It was just easier for me. Then I folded the cuff up over the bottom of the outer sleeve. I sewed the cuff down by hand. I started pinning one sleeve in. I then realized the opposite sleeve was backwards. Luckily, I hadn't sewn the outer fabric or cuff on yet, so I just zigzagged the raw edges and turned it out the opposite way. All it means is that on my right arm, the seam allowance is against my skin on the inside, instead of against the inside of the outer fabric. No big deal. Sleeves in, and it's complete. I added a hook and bar to the skirt to close the waistband and put the whole ensemble on. I am in absolute love with the floofiness of this dress. I think it is so pretty and just summery and Anne of Green Gables-y and just, yeah, I think it's so pretty. I also wanted to say that if you want to make a frothy, frilly Edwardian summer dress, go for it. You don't have to do hours upon hours of painstaking insertion lace to have a pretty dress. I mean, if that's your passion, by all means insert away. But a lovely ensemble can be achieved with machine sewing and pretty fabric too. I don't suppose I can have an Edwardian hot girl summer, since I'm not single, but I guess I could have an Edwardian hot married lady summer. Well, as it's too hot outside to take photos, I will keep my hotness indoors in the air conditioning for now. Rebecca of Pocketful of Poseys. Today's video is the final video in my new Edwardian series. It is the accessories. Now, I had made a pink belt a while ago, probably around a year ago. I made a pink belt just for fun because I wanted a pink belt. And so I decided to use that as a little bit of inspiration and make a hat as well as a new purse to go with my new white Edwardian ensemble. So without further ado, let's get to it. Here we go. I began with a cheap modern summer hat. I didn't have any set ideas or plans for how I wanted the hat to look. I really just experimented until I liked the look. I turned the brim up and pushed the top down a little so it wasn't rounded on top. I pinned the brim up into an interesting shape, I thought, and I tacked it down to keep the brim in the shape I wanted. Hercules had to make his presence felt as well. Now the fun begins. I played around with some lace scraps I had. I just laid it over the hat and arranged it until it looked kind of like a nest on top. I used a cut edge I had of the same lace and started pinning it on the back and sides of the brim. Once I liked the lace placement, I started sewing it down to the hat. Time for flowers. I bought these vintage silk flowers from Pink Swan Millinery on Etsy. Again, I didn't have a plan, I just started throwing flowers at the hat and arranging them until I liked the look. else does an ostentatious Edwardian hat need? Ribbon. I added a bow to the back and experimented with other bow placement. Checking the look on me, and Hercules wanted to give his opinion too. I tacked the flowers down. I didn't do a super secure job, but I will tack them down more securely if I take the hat out into the world. Then I decided I needed more bows and ribbon. I secured them to the hat. And it's done. Now to make a little drawstring purse for my phone, keys, etc. I used some dark pink silk du peony that I had in my stash. I used it for my belt as well. Video link below. I cut out lining for the purse from pink cotton. I pinned and sewed it to the silk. I turned it right side out and pushed out the corners. When I was sewing up the sides, I left openings on both sides of both ends for drawstrings. To finish those openings, I turned the seam allowance to the inside and whip stitched it down. For the end I left open to turn it out, I folded those ends to the inside and sewed the silk to the lining. Then I folded the purse right sides together and sewed the sides closed. After sewing drawstring channels on each end, I threaded some purple ribbon through. And the purse is done. I had a lot of fun making these accessories. The hat is kind of insane and I love it. And it's so just frilly and frou-frou-y and yeah. It's excellent. And the little purse is very, very useful as well. I put them on with my new Edwardian ensemble and I really, really like the way they all look together. I'm Rebecca of Pocketful of Poseys. It's Cozy 2021, the Costume Symposium. Today's video is a tutorial on how to draft a walking skirt to your measurements. There are many good walking skirt patterns out there that you can purchase. I will link some of them down below, but if you, like me, are interested in drafting your own to your own particular measurements, I'm going to show you how I have done that. So without further ado, let's draft this walking skirt. Here we go. Before we start drafting, we need to get some starting measurements. Front length, from where you want the waist to sit to your ankle or the length you want the skirt. Mine is 40 inches. Side length, this could be the same as the front length. It depends on your shape. Mine is 41 inches. Back length, again, this depends on your shape. Mine is 42 inches. Waist, corseted if you plan on wearing a corset. I measure mine at my smallest point and mine is 50 inches. Hips, over a hip pad if you plan on using one. Mine is 60 inches. Bottom width of skirt. All you want to do to find this is to multiply your waist measurement by 2.5. This pattern is a great beginner drafting project. I've made these instructions to be as simple and easy as possible using mostly modern methods. This is for a 5-gore skirt. Seam allowance is not included. To begin drafting, I like to use old wrapping paper for this because it's nice and wide, and sometimes it even has a grid on the back that's 1 inch. The front piece is cut on a fold, so draw a line that is 1/8 of your waist measurement. This is A to B. Mine is 6.25 inches. From A, draw a line 1/4 inch down. This is A to C. From C, draw a curved line to B. This is C to B. Draw a line down from C the length of the front. This is C to D. Mine is 40 inches. Draw a line from D twice the length of A to B. Mine is 12.5 inches. Make mark E. This is not the final E, but go ahead and make that mark there. Now draw an angled line down from B the length of C to D. Bring mark E up to meet line from B. Draw a curved line connecting D to E. And now for the side gore, you want to cut 2 of these. Draw a line 1/2 inch down. This is F to G. Draw a line from F 1/4 of your waist measurement. Mine is 12.5 inches. This is F to H. Draw a line from G down the front length measurement, which is 40 inches. This is G to I. Draw a line from I, double the length of F to H. Mine is 25 inches. This is I to J, and again, this J is not the final position. Draw an angled line down from H, the side length measurement. Mine is 41 inches. Bring mark J up to meet that line. This is H to J. Draw a curved line from I to J. Now for the back piece, you also will want to cut 2 of these. Draw a line 1/2 inch down. This is K to L. Draw a line from K, 1/4 inch of waist measurement. This is K to M. Mine is 12.5 inches. Draw a curved line from L to M. Draw a line from L down the side length measurement. Mine is 41 inches. This is L to N. Draw a line from N across, double the length of K to M. Mine is 25 inches. This is N to O. And again, that's not the final O placement. Draw an angled line down from M, the back length measurement. Mine is 42 inches. Bring O up to meet the line. This is M to O. Draw a curved line from N to O. For hem facings, draw a line 3 to 5 inches up from the bottom of each skirt piece and trace it to make your hem facing pattern pieces. After drafting your pattern, make a mock-up or toile of your skirt out of inexpensive fabric, especially if it's your first time drafting a pattern. I'm not showing a mock-up since I have made this before, but the steps are the same for a mock-up or a final skirt. After you make your mock-up and you're ready to get going with your fashion fabric, Go ahead and mark the center back, side back, and side front edges just to ensure nothing gets sewn on backwards. Hercules supervised my marking. Start by pinning the side front seams together. To draft a pocket, mark how wide and long you want it to be. I chose 12 inches for length and 6 inches for width. For the opening, I chose 9 inches. I freehanded curved lines to connect my marks and decided to make it a bit deeper. The shape is kind of a droopy letter D. Make marks on the pocket opening the width of the seam allowance. Let's start sewing. Sew the front and side gores, right sides together. I use a zigzag stitch to finish the raw edges on all my seams. Sew the center back seam, leaving an 8 or 9 inch opening at the top. Now to put in the pocket. I'm using one pocket, but you could make it 2 if you want. Mark on the side back seams where you want the pocket to start. If you want it on the side front seam, then use that seam instead. Match the mark you just made with the mark you made on the pocket pieces. Pin one pocket piece to one side back, right sides together. Repeat with the second pocket piece to the opposite side back edge. Sew the pocket pieces to the side back edges. Line up the side back seams and pin. Mark a stopping spot with a pin so you don't sew the pocket opening closed on accident. Sew the side back seams. Start at the top and sew to the pin you placed at the top of the pocket. Be sure to keep the pocket out of the way. Continue sewing the side back seam at the bottom of the pocket to the bottom of the skirt. Next, close the pocket by sewing around the edge. Zigzag or pink that raw edge. I zigzag all of my seam allowances. You can finish however you prefer. For the back opening, I am adding a placket. You could alternatively double turn the raw edge and not have a placket, but I think a placket is nice. First, cut on a fold a rectangle that is the length of your skirt opening, 8 inches for me, plus a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You would use whatever seam allowance you prefer, and 2 inches wide. This will be the left side placket. Sew the bottom edge, trim and turn out. Pin the placket right sides together to the left center back opening. Sew it on and finish the raw edge how you prefer. For the right center back opening, cut a strip of fabric 1.5 inches wide and the length of your opening plus seam allowance. Pin the strip of fabric to the right side center back opening, right sides together. Fold the bottom edge up the width of your seam allowance. Sew it on and fold over the raw edge of the opening. Pin it in place and sew it down with a whip stitch or machine if you prefer. To add darts, find the center of the side gores and fold the side gore in half. I made my darts about 1 inch at the top and marked down about 4 inches at an angle to the edge of the fabric. Sew your darts. Instead of backstitching at the point, I tie the ends of the threads. Get your second furry assistant to ensure proper technique. Next, we will add the waistband. Cut a strip of fabric on the grain as long as your waist measurement, plus 1 inch on each end for overlap. Fold the seam allowance in at the ends of the waistband. Pin the waistband right sides together to the center back, center front, and the side gores. You should have excess skirt fabric between the side back seam and the center back. Pleat or gather the excess to fit the waistband. If you don't want pleats in the back, you can make your darts bigger and add a dart to each back piece as well. Sew the waistband on and fold to the inside and cover the raw edges. Pin the waistband to the inside and give it a good ironing. Use a whip stitch to secure the waistband to the inside of the skirt. You could use the machine and stitch in the ditch, but I prefer to hand finish the waistband. Add a skirt hook and bar to the waistband to close. Onward to hem the skirt. Mark the bottom edges to make sure nothing gets pinned incorrectly. Take your hem facing pieces and pin the front to side, side back to back side, and center back to center back, right sides together. Sew them together. After sewing, pin the hem facing to the bottom of the skirt, right sides together. Sew the facing to the skirt and then iron the seam allowance toward the skirt and fold and iron the bottom edge of the facing toward the skirt as well. Turn the hem facing up to the inside of the skirt and pin in place. Secure the hem facing with a hem stitch. And your new walking skirt is done. I hope you found this video useful, and if you draft and make a walking skirt, let me know in the comments or tag me on Instagram at rebecca.pocket.full.of.poseys. I'm Rebecca of Pocketful of Poseys. Today's project I'm so excited for because it is my late Victorian, early Edwardian bicycling outfit. I've been planning this one for a while. I've had the fabrics for a while, and I finally have been able to make it. It has lovely autumnal colors, and I can't wait to show you. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Here we go! I started this project with the vest. I'm using the Marie vest pattern from House of Brick Designs on Etsy. Hercules helped get the pattern taped together. I traced over the pattern lines for my measurements since they're hard to see if you don't print on a color printer. I started with a mock-up. I used some printed cotton, not the same weight as the wool I'm using for the vest, but it'll give me a decent idea of the fit. I tried it on with my corset and quickly discovered that the bust is way too big. It's definitely patterned for a much larger bust than mine. The back looks good. I wonder if I need to take in the princess seams a little bit. I'm using this goldenrod colored wool. It's pretty thick, but I fell in love with the color and it's super soft. I adjusted the princess seam on the front side piece to make the bust fit me better. I pinned and cut out my pattern. I began assembly by pinning the fronts to side fronts. Then I had to do a search for thread. I was afraid I wouldn't have any, but I found some golden tan colored thread that worked. I stay stitched the neckline on the fronts and back. To the machine to sew the front princess seams. I clipped the curves and I will iron the seams open. Next, I marked and reinforced the corner at the side back. I clipped to the stitch line, but not into the stitch line. Then I lined up and pinned the back to side back pieces. After sewing, I clipped the curves of the seam. My next step was pinning and sewing the back peplum to the side backs. I pleated the peplum to fit the bottom edge of the back. I experimented with the idea of lining the vest. And I realized that if I did, the lining would show at the bottom of the back peplum. So I'm trying to decide whether I want to fully line this or not. It will add an extra layer of bulk. Store. You can't see them. It will add an extra layer of bulk, but I don't know. I kind of like the idea of having it fully lined. We shall see. I sewed the peplum to the back of the vest and trimmed the seam allowance. My next step was pinning and sewing the side backs to the side fronts. Now to sew the shoulder seams. Thor needed love. I decided to bagline the vest with my adjusted mock-up. I left the arm size and back peplum open to turn out. Hercules was helpful, as always. I trimmed the seam allowances before turning it out. To finish the peplum, I turned the seam allowance on the lining and vest in towards each other and pinned it in place. After ironing, I took it to the machine and sewed along every edge, making sure the lining didn't show on the outside. I will finish the arm size the same way. Buttons are all that's left. I'm going to use these brown buttons. They're plastic, but they almost look like wood. And I thought that would be cute on the front. So, and I have enough of them. I hand sewed buttonholes while I was at work and sewed on the buttons. For the skirt, I'm using Black Snail Patterns number 0714, the bicycle skirt pattern. I have this lovely cranberry colored wool for this skirt. It's kind of a summer weight, so it's not super heavy. It's got a very nice swish. Okay, so I am cutting out, well, I have cut out my skirt, and I realize that the width of the fabric that I had was not quite what I needed. So I got all of the pieces cut out, but I do not have enough left for the hem facings. Now, it's this kind of cranberry colored wool. I'm gonna see, I mean, I have some scraps left, but I don't think it's going to be enough. This is the biggest piece that I have left. I'm gonna see. But if I don't have enough, if I can't make it work, what I'm wondering is what I should use for hem facing. I have some scraps of this silk Dupioni, and they don't look bad together, but they're definitely not the same color. And then I also have this cotton. Where's the end of it? I've got a lot of this. I've got like 10 yards of this. This cotton jacquard, which is heavier, and it's not the same color, but it would give a sturdier hem facing. And since I have more of this, maybe that's what I should do. This wool that I'm using is a lightweight. It's more of a summer weight wool, because let's be honest, I live in Louisiana. I'm never going to need a heavy wool skirt. I'm never going to get to wear this vest as it is. It's so heavy. Maybe if I go to colder climes. But yeah, I'm trying to decide what to use for the hem facing. I'm leaning towards this, although since the silk is lighter, that might go with the wool better. But I don't know, color wise, I don't know which would be less noticeable, I guess, because the silk is shiny. So maybe I should go with the cotton. It's it's like a drapery or upholstery fabric. That might be the way to go, because that won't be as noticeable underneath. So yeah, off we go. I began the skirt by preparing the appliques. I marked the seam allowance, folded and ironed it to the underside of the appliques. My next step was pinning and sewing the appliques to the front of the skirt. They will be added to the back of the skirt as well. Then I turned and sewed the placket extensions on the front and side front edges. Pocket time! This skirt has a pocket in the right front side seam. Heads up, the pattern instructions say right side and the pattern pieces say left. So do what you want, I guess. And that may have been fixed since I bought the pattern, because I've had this pattern for a while. Next, I pinned and sewed the back seam. After sewing on the back appliques, I arranged the pleats at the center back. I waited to pin the side back pleats until I checked the waistband. I knew I wouldn't have quite enough material to do 2 pleats in the side back. I started the waistband by pinning the outer and inner back waistbands. I'm using cotton jacquard for the inner waistband. I sewed the top edge and trimmed the seam allowance. I repeated those steps with the front waistband. I pinned the outer waistband to the front of the skirt, right sides together. After sewing, I turned the waistband to the inside and sewed it down with a whip stitch. I repeated those steps with the back waistband and figured out the side back pleat as well. Hercules and Thor helped. Now onto the hem facings. I pinned the back facings to the side facings. I pinned and sewed the facings to the bottom edge of the back and sides. I turned the hem facing to the inside and pinned it in place. My next step was to attach the sides to the front. I also pinned and sewed the pocket pieces together. The left side skirt is closed with a button. I sewed a buttonhole by hand. I had trouble with the thread knotting up, so I just did the one buttonhole at the waist. I closed the rest of the opening with snaps and added decorative buttons down the left and right sides. Finally, I used a hem stitch to finish the hem facing. Then it was done. I am so happy to finally get to wear this outfit. I did add some padding in my corset to help fill out the bust since I didn't take quite enough out, but padding is period. I can also bike in this skirt. This project was so much fun. Thanks to Black Snail Patterns for sponsoring. Use the link below to get 15% off any digital pattern or the promo code POCKETFUL of Poseys. Hello, I'm Rebecca of Pocketful of Poseys. Today's video is a lot of fun. I am pattern testing a historical pattern based on an actual garment from Kenna Sews. A few weeks ago, she put out a request on her Instagram page for pattern testers for this plus-sized garment. It is a 1910 dressing jacket or dressing sack. So it's a casual garment that would be worn around the house or when you were getting dressed or when you were, doing things around the house. And I'm really excited to show you the process of putting this together. So without further ado, let's get to it. Here we go. This is a PDF pattern, so I first printed, taped it together, and then cut it out. My fabric for this project is a cotton blend shirting. I got my pieces all cut out and ready to get started. The pattern doesn't include seam allowance, so I added that. After cutting out my pieces, I transferred all of the markings. The short ends of the belt are folded under and ironed before folding the belt lengthwise and ironed. I found it interesting that the original garment that Kenna based this pattern on just had the raw edge folded under and top stitched down, rather than folded in towards each other and secured between the two layers of the belt. The front pieces have pleats at the shoulders which are sewn down. Welt seams are used at the shoulder seams. The front and back seam allowance is folded opposite directions and sewn with 2 rows of stitching, encasing both raw edges. The pattern included a handy diagram, which I appreciated since it had been a long time since I'd done a welt seam. The center front edges were turned twice and top stitched down, but I neglected to film that part. The back piece has an inverted box pleat in the center back. I pinned it first and tested before sewing the pleat. I ironed the pleat and the rest of the back before ironing the seam allowance down at the shoulder seam to prepare for assembling the welt seams. The belt is secured to the center back over the inverted box pleat. I'd like to send a heartfelt thanks to my monthly coffee supporters. I appreciate your support so much. The first step of assembly is pinning and sewing the welt seams at the shoulders. Next, I got ahead of myself and sewed the side seams. They are supposed to be sewn all in one go with the sleeve seams, so I got my seam rippers out and unpicked those side seams. Starting with the sleeve cuffs, I turned and ironed the top long edge of each cuff over. I gave the sleeves a quick ironing before attaching the cuffs. The sleeves are attached with welt seams as well, so I ironed the seam allowance on the sleeve heads and arm sides in opposite directions. Navigating the curved shape was a bit tricky. My next step was pinning and sewing the sleeve heads in with welt seams. The cuff instructions were the only part of this whole pattern that confused me. It could have just been user error, but also this was the first draft of the pattern. So I looked at the reference photos of the cuffs and attached them how it made sense to me. I'm not sure if it was correct, but it worked out. After sewing the cuffs to the bottom of the sleeves, I turned the cuffs up to the outside and top stitched them in place. The side seams and sleeve seams are done in one go, so I pinned and sewed one. Incorrectly? Wrong sides together. Ah well, seam ripping time again. I did a quick try on and realized that I had attached the belt too high on the back. I unpicked it and reattached it where it was supposed to be. Okay, everything is going really well, except for a couple of tiny little mistakes, which I have since rectified, but all that's left now is to put the collar on, and then hem, and then some closures, and then it's done. The original garment is completely machine sewn, but I had a few minutes waiting for students on Zoom, so I sewed the center back seam of the collar by hand with a back stitch. The raw edge of the collar is turned and ironed under and trim is attached. They are sewn at the same time with a top stitch. I chose to baste the collar on. This was an extra step not in the instructions, but it gave me peace of mind that when I sewed on the twill tape to cover the raw edges, the collar wouldn't wiggle out of place. Hercules lent his support on this part. The pattern suggests using bias tape for finishing the collar on the inside, but I didn't have any and I didn't feel like making any. I used twill tape instead and it worked out just fine. I sewed the twill tape to the right side of the collar, then turned it to the inside, covering the raw edges and secured it in place. On to the final steps. I turned up a narrow hem and sewed it. The original garment has a button for closure at the neck, but I didn't have enough room since I didn't alter the pattern at all, and I don't have much overlap at the center front. I chose a hook and eye. To close the belt, I used a hook and bar. A button would work just as well. Then it was done. Big thanks to Kenna for giving me the opportunity to pattern test. I really enjoyed testing this pattern. It does have a lot of ease if you are closer to the suggested measurements. If I were to make another, I would make some adjustments. I would lengthen it a bit, add a couple of inches to give myself more room, and widen the arm size, sleeves, and neckline a bit. It fits okay with no adjustments, but I think I would like a bit more ease, and then it would have a blousier effect. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to follow Kenna Sews on Instagram and Facebook. I will link all of that information below, and you can find out when the final version of this pattern is released. Hello, I'm Rebecca of Pocketful of Poseys. Today's video is another pattern testing video. I am testing another pattern for Kenna of Kenna Sews, and I will link all of her information in the description below. And this one is a 1918 dress. It's taken from an original garment, and I'm really excited to try this out. It's interesting, there are no closures, and the bust measurement on the original pattern of the original dress, the bust measurement is quite large, 57 inches or 58 inches. The waist measurement is 46 inches, I believe, and the hip measurement is only 52 inches. So it's got interesting measurements. So I know that it's not going to fit me perfectly. So I'm going to need to do some alterations, but I will take you through all of those alterations that I do. And I'm excited to share the finished garment with you. So without further ado, let's get to it. Here we go. This is a relatively new fashion era for me, so I looked online to see if I could find some fashion plates that looked similar to the extant dress. These day dresses look pretty close. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is just make up the skirt as a mock-up in its current size, and that will tell me where I need to add inches. I know I need to add inches because the hip measurement is way off from my hip measurement. The waist is only, what do I think, maybe 3.5 inches off my natural waist. I probably will wear a corset with this. I do not have a like 1918 corset. I just have my S-bend Edwardian corset, but I may wear that with this. But so that reduces my waist just, I think, like maybe an inch, not a whole lot. So I don't need to add a ton of room in the waist. But the hip measurement was, I think, 8 inches smaller than my hip measurement. So I'm going to put this skirt together. The first thing I'm going to do, of course, do all of my registration marks here. But the first thing I want to do is I want to sew this, and I'm just going to reduce the seam allowance and see where that gets me. I know that won't get me all the way, but I want to see what that does, because I'll probably just reduce the seam allowance in the waist as well. So we'll see. Hercules was on hand for mock-up support. A lot of things going on right now. Okay, so this dress doesn't have any closures, so I didn't leave anything open on the skirt. And so I'm just gonna try it on with the corset and see. Okay. B, F. F is front. So I didn't make any changes except I reduce the seam allowance. Now, I'm pretty sure it's still going to be too small in the hips, but we'll see how the waist ends up. Okay, so I think the waist is okay, but let's see if I can move the camera down so you can see the hip a little bit better. Definitely need more room in the hip because it is like right there. And if I sit, yeah, that's gonna be way too tight. Yeah. This fabric has a little tiny bit of stretch, but not a ton. So I think what I'm gonna need to do is reduce the seam allowance on the bodice and reduce the seam allowance obviously on the skirt, but I'm going to need to add width, but I'll need to taper it. I'm not going to change the top, but I will taper down. I mean, pretty much almost from the waist. I'm going to taper down all the way. All right. Yeah, I just need a little bit more room there. Okay, I need to add to each seam for the skirt. I added enough to fit my hips and tried to keep the tapered angle from getting too wide at the hem. So what I did here was I drew my extra bit and then I folded the paper so that I can cut them all out as one. I think I have enough of this green seersucker fabric. It is a blend, I'm pretty sure. I don't think it's 100% cotton, but it's been washed, and so it's definitely thinner. It's not a suiting material like the original, but I don't have enough of any suiting material to make this out of, so I'm gonna make it out of a lighter material. I'm also not going to be doing any French seams, so yeah. Chris got me a new little friend for Valentine's Day. So cute. For the bodice, I transferred all of the registration marks, darts, and pleat marks with my chalk pencil. I pinned the shoulder pleats and folded and pinned the center fronts. All of the bodice pleats were pinned, and then I thread marked my darts. The darts are pretty small. After sewing the darts, I removed the basting thread. The front bodice pieces are pinned to the back at the side seams and shoulder seams. To the machine to sew the bodice together. I went ahead and zigzagged my raw edges even though I cut the pieces out with pinking shears. The collar and collar lining are next. I didn't use a different lining fabric, I just used the same fabric. They are pinned and sewn right sides together, leaving the neck edge open. After trimming and turning out, the collar and neckline of the bodice are pinned together with a bias strip on top. The wrong side of the collar is pinned to the right side of the bodice. After sewing, the bias strip is folded over the raw edges on the inside and whip stitched down. Time for sleeves! I pinned and sewed the elbow darts on the lower sleeve pieces. Okay, I have just had some confusion about the lower sleeve piece. In my brain, I just kicked the camera. In my brain, lower sleeve meant like down here above the cuff, and I don't know why I wasn't thinking it's the lower sleeve under the arm, because there's an elbow dart, which, yeah, that took me a while to figure out. So now I know. And I kept thinking, okay, why are there these registration marks here and there aren't any on the bottom of the upper sleeve? My brain has figured it out at this point. So now I'm going to attach the lower sleeve to the upper sleeves. We'll do the French seam here, then we'll do the French seam on the other side, just so I don't get confused. Okay, so now we've sewn wrong sides to wrong sides. We're going to trim the seam allowance, and then turn it right side to right side. I pinned those trimmed seams right side to right side and then sewed again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now the raw edges are completely encased on the inside. The next step is pinning and sewing the sleeves into the arm size matching marks. They are gathered slightly at the top to fit. Finally, the cuff pieces are sewn together and added to the bottom of the sleeves. The sleeve bottom edges are gathered to fit the cuffs. The cuffs are turned in to cover the raw edges and whip stitched down. Okay, the bodice is all put together, so all that's left is to put the skirt panels together and then attach them to the bodice. So, I began pinning the skirt to the bodice waist edge, right sides together. I realized that my calculations were a tad off and my skirt waist was a little bigger than the bodice waist. Okay, so what I've decided to do, since my skirt and my bodice are not lining up correctly, at least the skirt waist is a little bigger than the bodice waist, which I should have thought about. I mean, I had to alter, and I'm sick today, so my brain is not working. But anyway, so what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to do a couple of little pleats in the skirt where the pleats on the bodice are, and that way at least those pleat lines will match up so it won't look weird. And yeah, that's my plan. Final steps: sewing the bodice and skirt together, zigzagging the raw edges, and hemming. I did my hem by hand. And it was finished. I think this dress turned out so cute. I would totally wear it for work because it doesn't look extremely historical or costumey. Links to the pattern and all of Kenna's info are linked below. What do you think about 1918 styles? Let me know in the comments. Thanks to my monthly coffee supporters. Hello, I'm Rebecca of Pocketful of Poseys. Today's video is another pattern test for Kenna of Kenna Sews. It's a 1915 to 1917 dress, and I'm really excited to share it with you. It's based on an extant garment, and Kenna went through a lot of work and trouble to take this garment and turn it into a pattern. I had a lot of fun making this dress. Also, this dressing jacket was also from a pattern from an extant garment by Kenna, and I will link all of her information down below as well as links to the patterns. So without further ado, let's get to it. Here we go. Mock-up time. Hercules and I mocked up the bodice. My measurements are larger than the original garment, so the first change I made was to reduce the seam allowance on all of the bodice seams. I cut the ribbon waistband to the pattern length. This fitting told me that I needed to increase the waistband length and add additional inches to the bodice pieces. The waist of the bodice is gathered, so I didn't need to add a huge amount, but this style needs kind of a blousy look. Okay, so I am having a bit of a dilemma because I want to get started on this dress, And my original plan was to make a wearable mock-up, but I mean, it wasn't really going to be a mock-up. So I mocked up the bodice, and I know what changes I need to make, and I'm going to make a couple of changes to the skirt. Not a lot. I'm just going to add a little bit on some of the seams, not a ton. And so it's not going to be that, I'm not changing the skirt that much. And so I ordered just some poly taffeta, so because I wanted to do something that looked nice, because the original is fancy, but I didn't want to spend a ton of money on it, honestly. So I ordered some poly taffeta in a pretty burgundy color, and it still has not shipped. And this pattern test, it has a deadline. It's a 2-week turnaround, and it's already been a week, and I've only done the bodice mock-up because I was waiting for the fabric, and it looks like it's not coming. So I went through my fabrics to see if I had enough of anything, and I don't have enough. I have some other taffetas, but I don't have quite enough of them, and one of them I was saving for a different project, and I wouldn't have had enough of that anyway, but I digress. Anyway, so because I wanted it to be a fancy dress, but I also don't have like lace that will match my other fabrics and things like that. So this is what I've decided to do. I'm going to forego the fancy, and I'm going to use this plaid. I've been making a lot of plaid lately, it seems. It's pretty thin. I think it might be a voile. I'm not sure if it's 100% cotton or if it's a blend. I've had it for a while. I actually bought it originally for my 1840s Miss Piggy Muppet Christmas Carol dress, and then I proceeded to lose it and had to buy entirely different purple plaid fabric for that dress. So I found this fairly recently in a box that I assume I put in the box. I put it in the box so I would remember where it was, and then of course I didn't remember where it was when I needed it. But anyway, so it's not gonna be fancy. It's gonna be plaid, but I do have, for the center vesty part, I have this. This is silk. It's Dupioni, and I bought this years and years ago, and when I bought it, it said it was a yard, but it was not a yard. It was more than a yard. I never measured it. I've used it for different things, for different accents. Like I made a belt with it, and I made a reticule, I think. But anyway, so color wise, I'm going to kind of hold these two up together. This fabric has a pink line, and it's not a perfect match, but it's pretty close. So I think that I will use this for the vesty center part, and I do not have any lace for that matches these fabrics for the lace accents. I have this lace that I might just sew onto some of the Dupioni, so then it still has that lace accent, but it's not exactly. I'm gonna have to see see how that lines up. Honestly, I wish I just had a piece of just white lace. We shall see. I ended up adding 1 inch total to the center back, 1/2 inch to the front side seams, and 1/2 inch to the center front. I increased the waistband length to fit my corseted waist measurement also. Hercules supervised as I cut out my pattern pieces. Starting with the pink silk vestie, I turned the edges under and top stitched them. And I gathered the bottom, which is left raw, but I did zigzag it for security. I added lace to the edges of the lace accent pieces. Matching marks, I pinned and sewed the tops of the vestie to the top edge. The neckline is bound with a bias strip. I sewed it on the machine, turned it over to the inside, and whip stitched it by hand to secure. The waist of the back piece is gathered. On the fronts, the shoulders are pleated. On to the only confusing, at least to me, part, the lapels and lapel extension. Kenna did tell me that she will be modifying the instructions in the final released pattern. She provided a video showing the lapels that helped me a lot though. The lapel extensions are sewn to the lapels, matching marks. I'm trying to figure out this lapel situation. I think the lapel piece with the extension, I've sewn those together, and I think they are sewn onto the front piece with the front piece on top, lapel on the inside, and then that's sewn, and then it's folded. Like the lapel is folded along its fold line, and then it gets folded again. The extension is top stitched on the outside of the bodice, and then the lapel folds over to cover that stitching. I just realized that I did both of my front pieces the same direction. So, I'm going to unpick the lapel off of this one and unpick the pleats and redo this side. So Snaps are used on the proper left side on the front and vestee. The right side of the vestee is sewn to the right front. Decorative buttons are added on the lapels. Next, the fronts and back are sewn at the shoulders and side seams. Then gathering stitches are run on the front waists. The right side of the vestee is stitched down to the right front. Quick try on with my corset to check the waist. Okay. So with my corset on, my waist measurement, where the bodice is sitting, is 48 inches. Okay, so the original is cut to 49 inches, and one end is turned over 1 inch. One is turned over by 2.5 inches. My piece is 53 inches. I'm going to pin it to the bottom of the bodice. But first, I added the snaps to the vestee. Now to pin the bodice waist to the waistband. Sleeves! The lower sleeves are sewn to the upper sleeves. Moving on to the cuffs, I sewed the cuff seams and turned and hemmed the bottom edges. Hercules was helpful, as always. Cuffs and sleeves are sewn right sides together and the sleeve is gathered to fit. I forgot to bind the raw edges. Oops. They're pinked, so it should be fine for now. Next, the sleeves are pinned into the arm size, matching marks, and gathering the top of the sleeves to fit. To the machine! I've started working on the skirt and have already made a big mistake. So the skirt front, it's cut on a fold, and one side has a pleat and the other side has a pleat and the closure. So it's got a placket, and it says right here, make this pleat on both sides, but cut and sew a closure only on the proper left side. Well, I cut through both sides. So I don't have enough fabric to recut this skirt piece. So what I'm going to do is just do the placket on the proper left side, and then I'm just going to sew it up. So I will have a little seam on the proper right side, and that's just going to be what it is. After checking the instructions, Hercules and I pinned the skirt seams. There's a pleat at each side seam to cover the seam towards the back. The front has pleats as well. On the proper left side, the front is pleated and laps over the left side edge, which has a placket. That's the closure, and it is secured with snaps. I pressed the pleats before adding the snaps. The proper right front is pleated and lapped over the right side edge and is secured down with decorative buttons. Now for the task of gathering the skirt to the waistband. The skirt waist edge is turned under on top of the waistband. Then the skirt is sewn down to the waistband. This skirt has a deep hem, and truthfully, I may have hemmed it a tad short because I forgot Freya isn't quite as tall as me, and I will wear my American Duchess Bernadettes with this dress, and they have a heel. I did the hem by hand. I prefer the look of that to a top-stitched hem. The final piece of the dress was the collar. It's bag-lined, and I didn't add interfacing, but probably should have. I also didn't bind it, just zigzagged and sewed it down with a whip stitch. I made belt option number 1. I added an inch to the back and front pieces to fit me. I used the plaid fabric for lining, and I pinned the lining pieces together to check the fit before I cut it out of my silk. I also interfaced the lining. Each belt piece is bag lined. I clipped the corners and turned the belt pieces right side out. After pressing, the back is lapped over the sides and basted down. The front is basted over the left side and left open on the right side for closure. Decorative buttons also hold the belt pieces together. 2 hooks and bars are sewn to the belt openings. And with that, the dress is complete. I really love this dress. I am so happy with the result. I'm also happy that my taffeta didn't show up on time because I'm kind of in love with this plaid. I definitely could have done a few things neater and worked harder to pattern match, but all in all, I'm super happy to add this dress to my 1910s costume collection. I may be a tad obsessed with this era now. Also, if you didn't know already from Instagram, we adopted our foster puppy, Kit Kat. Big thanks to my monthly supporters. You are awesome. How do you feel about 19 teens fashion? Let me know in the comments and tell me what you're currently working on or planning. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you spending your time with me. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't, and if you'd like to be notified whenever I upload, you can hit that little bell icon. To support the channel further, I have a Ko-fi account, and that is linked down below. Be sure to check out all of Kenna's links down below, and I will see you again on our next sewing adventure. Bye!